Welcome to the Love Mondays podcast. My goal is to bring inspiring and authentic guests on the show who can help us all love our Mondays and every other day. I'm very excited to introduce Lisa Broderick, a globally recognized leadership advisor, strategist, and thought leader. Lisa is the co-author of Permanence, written alongside legendary leadership expert Marshall Goldsmith, the world-renowned executive coach and best-selling author. In Permanence, she explores what it takes for leaders to build legacies that endure, not just in results, but in people, values, and culture. A trusted advisor to Fortune 100 executives, boards, and high-growth organizations, Lisa brings decades of experience at the intersection of leadership, innovation, and long-term strategy. Wow, that's quite an introduction, Lisa. Welcome to the podcast.
Ron, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me.
My pleasure. Okay, so I would love to start with a question I always start with is, First of all, do you love Mondays? And what's your advice for people who don't necessarily love Mondays or have the Sunday scaries?
You know, and I think, and that also goes to why I wrote Permanence, because, and we'll get into that, but the methodology allows you to love Mondays. So here's the backstory. You know, I think when someone says they don't love Mondays, what they are most often saying is that they don't really feel fully alive in their own life. That sounds pretty profound, but it's not a work problem. It's a meaning problem. And I think we have a meaning problem, a connection problem in society. So somewhere along the way, we have all done this. We started living on autopilot. We were doing what's expected. We're managing our responsibilities. We're carrying stress with grace. And we stopped asking themselves the very simple question, am I showing up as the person I want to be? You know, you don't fix anything by quitting a job or doing something dramatic. You do it by coming back to yourself in small ways. And that's what really this is all about. So choosing one conversation to be present at, choosing gratitude even when the day is, terrible, choosing to be your best instead of judging yourself. When you choose to trust yourself, you can show up aligned with who you want to be, which is what this is all about, even on an ordinary Monday. And when you do that, Mondays go away. They don't become Mondays. It's not necessary to think that way anymore.
I love that. So did you have a point in your career where you didn't love Mondays? And if so, how did you break free of that?
Well, I think it grows over time, and it also goes in sort of cycles, right? So we've all been there. You know, you start to get some success and you get in the groove and you stop doing things that matter to you. And maybe, and it's a slippery slope, they always say, right? You have you're promised to be home with your children and, 5 nights a week. And then, you have to have a meeting. So you actually allow the meeting to happen and then it's 4 nights. And you're not going to work weekends. And so you end up working a weekend anyway and you think it'll be okay. Well, your children are noticing. What's happening is you're not noticing. And of course, that's happened to me, in cycles of time over the last many decades. It happens, with regularity. Less frequently since Permanence, for sure, because I now know how to get myself back to what truly matters by having a daily practice.
Amazing. Yeah. And we'll definitely get into the practice and the questions. I think that's so powerful. But I want to start with your process, right? And I'm a big fan of Think and Grow Rich. And I know Napoleon Hill went on this big process. So can you share the conversation with Marshall and how this book initially started?
Well, that is such a funny story. So here's the backstory, and it actually appears in the book because I had to write it down. And it was in 2023, and I had known Marshall, and he called me up one day and he said, "Lisa, I want you to do some research for me." And Ron, you know Marshall, that could mean anything. Marshall does research. He does research on organizations and people. And as it turns out, what he wanted me to do was call a cohort of his very, very high profile clients every day for a year and ask them a set of very simple questions, the 6 daily questions, which we'll get into, plus some other questions they might have been interested in terms of their own lives. And we worked out what those were. And so I set off for a grand adventure. I was an economist by training, and so I love data. And now I work in coaching and working with people and leaders and organizations. What better way to combine the two into a real project of joy than to call these leaders and ask them these questions for a year? What was hilarious was what they did over the year. And what they did over the year was there were snowstorms and holidays and vacations and the occasional meeting, dinner with the head of state, where the call would be very, very late, even sometimes midnight, and they could be around the world. So I tracked them down dutifully. And when I got them, I'd ask them the daily questions. My job was to listen, no judgment. If they wanted to talk about something, we were free to do that, and took down the data. And what was so interesting, and the reason we wrote Permanence, is that the data started to change over time. So at first, if you were to gauge yourself on a scale, which we recommend of, let's say, 1 to 10, 1 being closer to no and 10 being closer to yes. So at the first part of the cohort for this year project, they were all over the map. Could be 1, could be 10, could be 9, could be 7, could be 3. And so with their questions and the other questions, and then sort of magically, they started to coalesce. They were coalescing right around 5 or greater in the first couple of months. When we got to 6 months, it was clear they were all coalescing, which is rare for an entire cohort, which meant they were actually doing it, which we'll get to later. And so then from the 6 months to the year, they coalesced again, really around perfect scores. And that's when we knew we had something, because we got these leaders to actually do this over the course of a year. And the question was, did they get better or did they not get better? The answer was definitely, did they get better? So we did 2 things very interesting after that. We let half of the cohort go and we continued on with the other half of the cohort. You can probably predict what happened. The half of the cohort that stopped doing it did not get better. In fact, they fell back. And the half of the cohort that continued to do it continued to get better and are now continuing to ask questions, plus even more of their own questions or different questions. So that was one profound result. The second result was really profound. We asked them, I called them up and I said, so why is it? Why did you do your daily questions every day? Why do you think that your scores got better over time? And to the person, said in a different way each time, it was this. Throughout my day, I knew that you were going to call me. And so I changed my behavior in real time to become the person I wanted to be, because I didn't want to suffer the shame and embarrassment of having to tell you I didn't even try. Think about that.
Yeah,
So the world's leaders are better because and became the person they want to be. That it was so profound. I imagined at that moment, what if everybody did that? And then Marshall said, let's write a book. And we did.
I love it. What a story, right?
It's a great story.
Congrats to you on going on that adventure. I love how you said it's an adventure, and you're calling folks at midnight, and you're having dinners with heads of states, and
no, they are.
That must have been.
I'm trying to catch them after the dinner.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what was really interesting is I'm a big fan of Marshall Goldsmith. I remember watching a video of his probably 10 years ago that he shared how he would have his secretary or somebody call him every day, even to keep himself accountable. So again, practicing what he preaches. And it
even
just
the master who developed it. And he'll say, I'm Marshall Goldsmith, I need help. And you know what? He does it to this day.
Yeah, no, which is really powerful. And it just shows accountability as well as human nature, right? Because we often might compromise our values. You talked about, hey, the 5 dinners to 4 dinners, for example, and how we can have these tools like accountability partners to help us stay on track. And, quick story, I actually had Marshall on my podcast, but it took me 3 years to get him on the podcast. And he would share this, right? He was coaching me in real time and really believes in it. Okay, so I'd love to get into the 6 questions. I know you talked about the 6 questions. So tell me more about the 6 questions and exactly how you wrote the questions along with Marshall's daughter, I believe.
He did write the questions with his daughter. And so the 6 questions came out of his decades of research working with leaders around over 200 Fortune CEOs. And what he noticed is that people were drifting away from who they wanted to be. And so they were high performers. They had every resource available to them, but they were still human, right? And in their humanness, they were not able to really maintain how to become extraordinary. So he came up with the first 6 questions that are foundational to becoming a person that we would all want to be. Today, did I do my best to be happy? Did I do my best to find meaning? Did I do my best to write down my goals today? Did I do my best to keep to my goals? You notice they're all starting with do my best.
Yes.
So there are 6 questions along those lines. And then the second half of it was he was trialing and talking about his daily questions with his daughter, Dr. Kelly Goldsmith. And she had a suggestion that changed everything. And it put personal accountability back on the person. And she said, Dad, why don't you use active questions? Active questions are, did I do my best, where you're actually participating in the question rather than being the subject to some exogenous event like a bad thing happening, right? So let's say that you're going along fine and your cat runs across the road and you swerve and you hit a tree and suddenly your car is inoperable, unusable, right? So did I do my best to be happy that day? Might be yes, but was I happy today? It might be no, because you're judging yourself against an external event. But you can still be happy. You can still find meaning in the small moments that day. and it brings everybody back to accountability. Personal accountability is what it's all about. That's where the real power is.
Yeah, and I love it. And there's that element of choice, right? We have a choice how to interpret a given event, right? And I've been reading a lot about stoicism lately and how it really is around what are the things we actually control and what are the things that are out of our control, right? And,
Right.
traffic and weather and politics, things like that. It's easy to get really down on those, but I try to say, what are the things we can control? And I love the active elements of the question. So,
Right.
did I do my best is a wonderful question to say, did I choose to be happy? For example, I love the spirit of the question. So, do you use the questions daily? Do you practice
Well, here's
this?
here was the other wonderful thing that I didn't bring up when I was talking about writing the book. If I'm asking the questions, guess what I'm thinking about all day? Did I do my
Yes.
best to be happy? Did I do my
Yes.
best to find meaning? Did I do my best to build personal relationships? It changed me, which is why when you mentioned the buddy system, that's so powerful. And so this method, which is so here's the method. It's daily questions. It's 6 daily questions. In the book Permanence, we have the 6 daily questions. There's a blank journal in the back with which has the 6 daily questions, and you can write your own questions and you can score them from 1 to 10, 1 being closer to no and 10 being closer to yes. So you start doing that and then you choose a time of day. I do it at the end of the day. And for the leaders, I tried to track them down at the end of the day. It was just easier. And so at the end of my day, and many people do it at the end of their day, you could do it at the beginning of the next day. You reflect quietly, you set a time that's for yourself. It only takes 2 minutes. You know how I know that for a fact? I did it for a year with a whole bunch of people. And I timed it. And the answer was this really does take 2 minutes. And so for 2 minutes a day, whether it's in the evening when you reflect on your day or the next morning, you have time for yourself. It's very much a part of Stoicism, as you mentioned, Ron. And you reflect on your day and you reflect on the 6 questions plus the questions you ask for yourself. And I have heard some incredibly profound questions. Did I do my best to forgive my parents? Did I do my best to avoid angry or destructive comments? Did I do my best to forgive myself? You start asking yourselves these questions, and you will begin to show up as the person you want to be. And that's the
I love it.
practice. If you can do it for 2 weeks, you can do it for a long time. The journal has 2 weeks worth in the back. There are many ways of doing it. And then also, as Marshall has a coach, essentially, a buddy who calls him, a lot of people do that. It's what I was doing. I was, as a coach, calling them and calling someone and asking them this. Two people who are together that you trust will actually call you can have this relationship going forward. If you have an executive coach, a professional coach, use them. There are apps. There's the paper method, which we offer in the book. Many ways to do this. Also, you get to the same thing: the power of personal responsibility and accountability.
Yeah, I love it. So a couple of things on that. So let's start with individuals. So let's say an individual doesn't love what they do. Back to the Monday question. What can they do to start developing the right questions for themselves to start being more intentional and finding more purpose, being authentic as you talked about? Like what's that first step for somebody who's maybe not loving their life right now?
Well, I think it's all about accountability, right? It's your choice. Even how you feel is your choice. So let's frame this in terms of accountability because it's really the bridge between intention and reality, which is what you're talking about. You don't love your life, right? And you may have, I'm sure that someone in that position has an intention to love their life, to be a better person, but the reality doesn't match it. But in some sense, I think a lot of people know who they want to be. They want to be simple things. They want to be more present. They want to be more patient. They want to be more courageous, more aligned with their values. It's the ability to do this on a daily basis where you're not judging yourself. It's accountability. It's not about judgment or punishment. It's about personal honesty. So that personal honesty and integrity go hand in hand. And this is a process that makes it very simple. So if you were to sit down right now and have your page or have the journal in the back of the book, and it's blank with the 6 questions, we always recommend starting with those. Start thinking about things in your life. Who is the person I want to be? And here's a really good one. And we do this in the book, the hero's exercise. Who is someone who is my hero? Because guess what? Would you admire in them is what you would admire in yourself. So you can do it that way and come up with questions so that you can be more like them if you're stuck, which brings you closer to who you want to be because you admired them for that in the first place.
Yeah, no, and I think it takes a lot of introspection to stop for a minute, right? Because we're in this world which is social media and news and politics, and most people, I think, grab their phone first thing in the morning. Whereas, I've learned, my morning routine is I start with gratitude and I actually start with affirmations, things like that. But I'm definitely going to add these questions that I'm going to develop because I think it's pretty powerful to just help me stay accountable. And I have a friend who has this wonderful book. It's all about getting healthy. His name's Kevin Brady, and he has these 4 questions, 4 wheels of life, he calls it. So it's mindset, it's exercise,
Mhm.
and there's a couple more wheels there to say, am I on a scale of 1 to 5 living to where I want to be? And it's no
Nice.
judgment, as you talked about. It's
Yeah.
about how am I doing over time? So if I had
Right.
a poor eating day, for example, nutrition's one of them, then maybe the next day I'll do a little better, or
Right.
exercise if I didn't get my step count. So it's really around that introspection. And I love the process. And I also love the 2 minute factor too, right? Because many times we make excuses saying, I don't have time, I've got a busy schedule. But I love the fact that you're saying a lot of the hard things in life are actually very simple, but we
Right.
overcomplicate them. So I love that 2 minute rule to say, you can do this really quickly and everybody can do it.
Well, and also with your friend's question, if you're measuring outcomes, we don't control outcomes. Think back to the cat running across the street, which you would
Yes.
never harm, and then suddenly the car is wrecked as a result of you in a split moment doing the right thing at the person you want to be. But if you measure your effort, right, it changes everything. So if we're only measuring results, then we're going to be disappointed. If we're measuring our effort, we can disappoint ourselves by not trying. But honestly, you wrote the questions. So trying should be pretty easy for you because you did write the questions and you're only showing up for yourself in these small ways.
Yeah, and there's a whole notion of letting go of the outcome because we don't control the outcome. It's we control the input, which I think these questions get to, and I think that's really powerful. Okay, perfect. So what about organizations, right? So let's say a leader wants to add accountability within themselves and their teams. Could that apply in organizations as well? For example, one-on-one meetings. Like, what if you have these questions that you have joint accountability with your team members?
Absolutely. So so executives and entrepreneurs, you think about our work life, especially today, we're surrounded by urgency all day long. And funny that urgency makes itself it pretends to be important, but it can really not be important. And so, what permanence does is it allows you to slow down just long enough at that moment, at the end of the day, to ask yourself what's important. Not did I get everything done? And so, this can be done with teams, it can be done with entire companies. And coincidentally, I just met a wonderful friend, a very like minded thought leader, a man named Harry Max, who wrote a really wonderful book called Managing Priorities. I highly recommend it. And it's for
Love
companies
it.
and individuals. And so, what I really admire about that work is how clearly he explains the difference between what a demand is, demands your attention, and what really deserves it. That's prioritization. And so, when you consciously decide outcomes that you want to pursue, rather than being a ping pong ball, around the day during the day, that clarity changes everything. Because when you know your real priorities, you stop negotiating with distraction, being distracted, and daily questions fits into that. And here's why. Now, imagine you do that and you always know your priorities. You have a team, the team knows its priorities. There are 10 teams in the company, and all the teams in the company know their priorities. And so the whole company knows its priorities. What do you do now that would be the most impactful thing? You do daily questions. You take your priorities from the team and from the individuals and you make them your daily questions. Now you're not just deciding what matters, you're acting on it. It's not about just once a year. You're reinforcing every single day the priorities of that company, and that supercharges a team or a company.
Yeah, and one of the things I do is I facilitate groups of executives and CEOs, and it's a very consistent theme around burnout and having way too many priorities on the list. And I think it's a wonderful exercise a leadership team can do to say, "Hey, let's really understand our key priorities." And I love the urgency and importance matrix as well, and say, can we develop a set of daily questions, even if it's a quick daily huddle, to say, are we staying true to what we said, right? Because it's easy for things to creep, and what it impacts is people at the lower levels of the organization. And in fact, I was coaching somebody today, and he was just telling me how like all the meetings start late because they've got too much. The meeting etiquette's not quite where it needs to be, and it's not out of bad intention. It's sometimes that's how things evolve without the right accountability
No,
process. So
but
I
people
love
notice it's not a priority. People's time is not a priority. Well, that's not a good message, right?
absolutely, absolutely. And that's where I think this is a nice tool that leaders can use to hold themselves accountable to what they said, right? To staying true to how they want to lead. Amazing. Can you share any other stories, from the book, from your research, not specific names or anything around what are some shifts you've seen with people or individuals using this process?
Well, you can imagine it's incremental and it's iterative over time. So with the cohort, we started out with the 6 daily questions, and then people had, let's say 4 to 7 additional questions, however many there were. Really, our recommendation is that it's not too many, right? Because you really bog yourself down, and then you may not even look forward to it. So we started out, and everybody had their different questions, and we went through, and it was really hard at first. In fact, Marshall says if you can't do it for 2 weeks, most people drop out before 2 weeks if they don't have a system in place in order to do that. So what was created, and I highly recommend as a story, the story of what happened, create a system ahead of time. Know that life happens, right? Things happen, distractions happen, right? As Marshall would say, the low probability, high impact event of hitting the tree because the cat ran across the road. All these things happen. If you have a system in place ahead of time, you won't falter from it, even if you do hit the tree and the car is wrecked, right? You'll continue to do that. So that's really the first thing, that we set up a system around people. And then the calling every day, that's part of the system. You're going to need someone. We recommend a person, because remember what motivated these leaders who really don't have to be motivated at all. They have the success, they have the resources, they're brilliant, the company is behind them, and still they benefited from someone else calling them that day, someone whose call they would take, someone they knew was going to ask these questions, and they had to show up for it. So get a buddy. If you don't have an executive coach, get a buddy. With that said, if you can't do that, you can, and you're very disciplined, you can do paper, and there are apps out there. So all of those things accrue to the experiences that people have, but they're kind of universal. Get past 2 weeks and set up a system for yourself. You know the time of day it's going to be, that it works for you. That's why the first 2 weeks are so important. You're figuring out your system and how you're going to write it down. If you're going to write it down, get yourself a journal. And if you're just going to be called, get yourself a buddy and set that time of day and set that up for yourself. And then know your questions well enough so that after the 2 weeks, you get into the month and 2 months and 3 months and beyond that, that you'll start remembering the questions during the day, which is why these leaders said what they said. Again, my mind immediately goes to, wow, what if everybody did that? It would be such a different world, a world of priorities and fewer distractions and meaning in people's lives, and a lot of these things that really plague us, like scrolling, and
Yes.
and our lives being taken up with things that really don't matter, would pretty much evaporate because we have done small things for ourselves consistently and became the person that we wanted to be.
Yeah, no, I love that. And so the question of permanence, right? So clearly, if you do it for 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, and you've got that accountability partner, is this essentially like a lifelong process, or is that like, so for example, I love the study you said where 6 months later, the people who stopped doing it started falling off on their
Right.
performance, right?
Uh-huh.
So is this something like, hey, this is a lifelong commitment and in a good way?
Yeah, the good news is it's 2 minutes a day, but like any other practice, it is lifetime. And so, we used to say in New York, "I got it, I got it, I got it, I don't got it." And so, yeah, you can get better, and you need the news is for this, in order to stay better, continue to do this. But it's just like any other practice. I mean, you brush your teeth, and some people may meditate. I happen to be a meditator, so I set aside time for myself. It was easier for me to do. But even just the setting aside time for yourself honors you. So the answer is yes, it's a lifetime practice. It's a lifetime practice that will benefit you greatly. There is nothing like perspective for you to see your life clearly, for you to stop comparing, for you to get a hold of your life, be honest with yourself, and really envision the person that you want to be, and then have the tools to be able to become it.
Yeah, I love it. And back to stoicism and journaling was a big part of it, right? Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It was that act of self-reflection and saying, how can I get better? How can I learn from things? Because we're not perfect, which is amazing. So what about the questions? Do they change or do you keep the same questions? Like how often would you
Yeah.
change these questions?
Well, now with so with the original cohort, again, we had the 6 daily questions, which are in the back of the book, and we talk about them in the book, right, in the journal. And we recommend starting with those. These are tried and true over time. Marshall's worked with over 200 Fortune 500 CEOs, and these questions are foundational. And the way they're phrased, again, is the active. Did I do my best to be happy? Just think about that question for a moment and wonder if you should ask yourself that question every day. I think everybody would say the answer is yes. So the 6 daily questions don't change. With that said, your questions change. And now I've noticed some of these cohorts have been going, it's 2026. Think about that. They're still going.
Yes.
So we are changing their questions about every 6 months. Here's another really fascinating application of it that we're starting to do. Do a 360 and make the things you want to work on out of the 360 your daily questions.
I love it.
It gives you something to do. If the feedback that you got in your 360, which of course is very candid and from a lot of different stakeholders, if that is something you want to work on, you now have a method to actually make it real in your life.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I know Marshall always talks about it has to start with a 360. And he always says, hey, the 2 words you say after getting feedback is thank you. So I love that because it truly is a gift. And a funny example. So I think it was last weekend, Canada and the US played in hockey.
We are,
And
yes.
unfortunately, my team in Canada lost.
Oh, so
And
sorry.
in the Olympics. So a lot of my friends, I had a friend who texted me yesterday. This was like many days after and said, I'm still really upset about the hockey game. But I used to be like that. Within a couple of hours, I'd forgotten about the game because I can't
Yeah,
control the outcome. Yes, I'm a little disappointed. I wish we won in overtime, but it's that, did I choose to be happy or did I try my
right.
best to be happy? That question comes back because why would I stew in misery for something I cannot control at all? Instead of saying, hey, that was a fantastic game. Yes, I wish my team won.
Yep,
And let's move on with our day. And it's really helped me just shift my perspective on what's controllable and what's not controllable. So that's the
that's right.
power of these questions. Did I do my best to be happy? It's really, really powerful.
You're never going to be able to win a game completely where it's exogenous events that you don't control. The only thing you can control is yourself, as you've just said.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so tell me about your book writing process. So I wrote a book and I had a rule. I'm going to write for 30 minutes a day. Some days it was really easy. Some days it was really hard, but it was back to the system, which you referenced in the question. So
Right.
tell me about your book writing process.
Yeah, it was a little different for me. And so, first of all, writing the book was such a blast. Marshall is he's a joy to be around. He's fun. He has great stories. It never felt like we were set out to manufacture something. It was like uncovering something that had already been there for a long time. And Marshall spent so many decades in conversations with leaders about change and behavior and what actually works that when we sat down to write, the book almost wrote itself. So it wasn't arduous at all. And so for my writing process, it would come out of a conversation that I had with him, and we're trying to give language to the patterns that he had seen over and over again in his work. And, it was a lot of fun. I don't write in spurts. I didn't need to do it daily, although these are daily questions. It was so energizing and so fun that it really wrote itself in a very short period of time. And also I have a sort of a quirk that has been made fun of by colleagues over a long period of time, decades. And that is, I have an elliptical at home, a gym at home, and like a professional gym elliptical. And I put the laptop on the elliptical and I stay on for hours.
Wow.
And that's how I get my writing done. And so I can get my writing done on a plane ride because no one's bothering me, and on an
Yes.
elliptical where I don't allow anybody to bother me. So those 2 methods for me were a lot. Again, it sort of wrote itself, but I do recommend if someone's writing a book, make it your daily question. Did I do
Yeah.
my best to put my thoughts down on paper? Another hack, if you will, that I used is I use a recorder. I record myself, you could write down everything. It's easier to record. I have a prior book that came out in 2021 and the iPhone really wasn't such a great recorder at the time. So I had a professional recorder, like an MP3 recorder. But now you can just use your iPhone, get those thoughts, transcribe them, put them in one place, and then think about them. Those can be pearls of wisdom that could change everything. Your title can come out of it, your subtitle, what it's really about. And then whenever I've written a book, I've asked myself this question. If a reader buys this book, they will get what? X,
Mm,
blank, to be filled in. Every writer should be able to answer that question. Of course, ours
yeah.
is, if you read this book, you will become the person that you want to be and you'll stay that way.
I love it.
And any promise like that is aspirational. And then that's what the book is about.
I love it. For some reason, I was picturing you on an elliptical typing away.
I
But
know, I
you're saying,
know.
do you actually do that, or do you record
Oh, I
your
do. No,
voice?
I type, and much to the horror of my chiropractor, several chiropractors actually, over time, because I've been doing this for decades.
Wow.
I did this in business school, which was quite a long time ago. And it was a room of my own, a space of my own. No one would bother me. And I stayed on there for as long as I needed to. And it really focused my thoughts.
Wow, talk about two amazing activities combined, right? You're exercising,
I got
writing,
my
and
exercise. That's
yeah,
good.
that's some serious habit stacking there for sure. But I work for a company and I facilitate, and Susan and Ann are our two fearless leaders. They have walking treadmills. So oftentimes we'll be in a meeting and they're walking. I feel like, okay, I need to do the same. So maybe
You
I need to
bet.
get an elliptical in my office. I think that's a
If I in a company that if I were doing that and I would hook it up to the power that runs their monitor.
wow. Wow.
Yeah, how fun would that be? That's a little, you know, that might be a
Yeah.
little
So okay.
much,
So
but
tell me more about Marshall. So like, I mean, you have the privilege of spending time with a legend and such a nice man like that. So tell me a little bit more. Like,
he
what did you
is.
learn from Marshall?
I think it's so important. What Marshall has this way of reminding people that life isn't about something you wait to enjoy, and he's
Yes.
learned that through all of his work. Right? You don't enjoy it after you've accomplished something. And he said when he says life is good, he doesn't say this in a way that's just a one-off. He doesn't mean that life is always easy or perfect. He means that even in the middle of pressure or disappointment, which happens to all of us, there's always something worth appreciating, even on that really, really hard day. You need to choose to notice it, however. And I've watched him work with extraordinary leaders and successful people over time. What stands out is his wisdom. It's his joy. He's always deeply curious about people and genuinely grateful for small moments. And he's completely present when he speaks with people, whoever he's talking to.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
being around him taught me that happiness isn't the reward at the end of success, which is such a gift. It's the foundation that makes success worth achieving, worth going for in the first place. And I
Yes.
think that's what he's all about.
Yeah, no, he uses this line, be happy now,
I
right?
know.
Which I really find powerful. So it took me 3 years to get on his podcast. And it was Gary Ridge, the former WD-40 CEO, who
Oh,
actually
right.
finally helped me get the breakthrough to have him on my podcast. But you, on the other hand, he's calling you to ask you to do projects. So how does somebody like you become a person who Marshall calls? Like, what did you do? Like, give us some life strategies here to be the
Well,
type of person that Marshall can trust and rely and want to spend time with. So congrats on that. I'm sure people are doing the same with you, but what is some life advice you can give us on that?
well, I think for anyone, so we may, someone who's out there who's beginning or has a desire may be self-limiting in their belief as to what's possible. And so Marshall is very generous with his time. He's a very generous person. Send him an email. And he wouldn't be mad at me because he says this all the
Yes.
time, Marshall@marshallgoldsmith.com. And tell him, whatever you're going to tell him. I wouldn't make it long, but if you request some of his time to tell him about yourself, you may just get it. And that's true with
Amazing.
really anybody. You see something, go for it. Because again, you're not waiting for life to happen to you to be successful later. It's what you do now. It's the small daily actions that you take that become that success over time and also allow you to become the person you want to be. So if that's something that you want to do, I would go ahead and do that. And with
Yeah,
anybody you
amazing.
can really think of.
Amazing. And the fact that I'm talking to you is directly related to I did that exact thing where I found his email address. I emailed him. And his exact email was, life is good. I'm working on this big AI project. Check in with me in a few months. Like, he's so gracious. And he was also really good at probably saying, okay, I have this commitment, my 6 daily questions.
That's
If I
right.
say Ron, if I say yes
Priority.
to Ron today, it's going to take away from it, but maybe in the future. So it was such a wonderful example of exactly what this book is teaching.
Yes. If you see a chance, take it.
Amazing. What else did you learn in this book, or what else will readers learn when they buy this book?
It's very simple, right? And it's been tested with Fortune 500 CEOs for a very long time. And it began as a very simple thing. That all these people with extraordinary resources struggled with the same problems that everybody else does. And so what can we really do about that? And so it takes that practice out of the executive suite and puts it in everybody's hands. I'd say that's very important. Anybody can do this. And then we wanted to simplify and ground it in an everyday life, and connect it to something deeper. But it really, the words, you want to become someone that you want to be. You don't have to change your whole life to change your life, right? It's small.
Yes.
This is all about small increments, which I think the Stoics would appreciate, right? Do that long enough. Do what you need to do in order to appreciate small moments long enough, and everything else will follow. And keep changing your questions. And
I love
Marshall
it.
often says at the end of your life, when you're 90 years old, nobody asks you whether you won enough. Nobody asks you whether you were successful enough, whether you were rich enough. The real question is, were we present enough to notice our lives while we were living it? And I think that's very profound. And that's what Marshall's
Yeah.
all about.
Yeah, I love it. And there, I'm not sure if you've read the fantastic book, The Five Regrets of the Dying, which connects to that question. So Bronnie Ware wrote a phenomenal book, which connects to exactly that. And in the spirit of books, I see the let them theory on your shelf.
Yes,
What
Mel
what are
Robbins.
what are top 3 to 5 book recommendations that you would recommend to my listeners?
Well, I am so thrilled. So Mel actually endorsed the book on the cover,
Yes,
everybody.
yes,
So Let Them Theory. So Let Them Theory is about letting go of those things that hold you back, which may be judgments of how other people are behaving, and simply be present with yourself, which is a lot of what Daily Questions is about. That's number one. Number two, another book is called CEO Ready by Mark Thompson, a
okay,
wonderful book. And so, it sounds like it's for CEOs, and it is, but it's really for all leaders. How to become the person you want to be. If you aspire to be in that leadership role, this is the book for you. And number three is a book that just came out from a friend of mine, Nilofer Merchant. It's called Our Best Work. Wow. She has worked in so many different companies around tech and primarily in her life, and has a wonderful, remarkable background. And she writes about how we can show up as the best person we can be, and the stories that she has collected over time of herself and others, of all the examples for when people don't show up by
yes,
contrast. So Our Best Work, definitely CEO Ready, and Let Them. It would be three of my very, very high recommendations.
yeah, no, and
Wait,
one
and
of
one
the other,
more, Managing Priorities. Harry
yes,
Max.
which you
I
mentioned,
just ran into that. You know what? So was famously said, what matters gets measured. And so, but what happens gets prioritized.
yeah, I
So
love
when
it,
you
and
don't prioritize, you're just a ping pong ball and not a lot happens. When you do prioritize, and you're doing daily questions, and you're doing these other things, then you really make things sing. I highly recommend managing priorities for teams and companies and people, just priorities in
amazing,
your own life. And here's the funny thing, just like daily questions, which is so simple, you ask yourself daily questions every day, you could write a whole book about it. Well, you know what? Sometimes you need to write a whole book about it. Like Mel wrote a whole book about Let Them, which seems
yes,
dead simple, and it worked. People think that priorities are simple to do and everybody knows how to do them. That's not true.
yeah.
There are
I mean, Mel
definitely ways
Robbins.
to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds simple, but it's very hard to do, right? I mean, even the questions, like they're simple. Yes, we all have 2 minutes, but it holds us accountable all day, right? Like that's the power of
Yes.
spending those 2 minutes. And then the other book that I think is really powerful that's on my shelf is The Coaching Habit, and I think Michael Bungay Steiner
Right. Oh, Michael
wrote.
Bungay. I'm sorry, I did not do
Yeah,
that.
he wrote the
Habit is
foreword,
just
I
fabulous.
believe, right? And
Yes,
he also has the 7 coaching questions, I believe.
he
There's 7
does.
coaching questions in there, and it just shows the power of the questions, whether you're asking it to yourself, your accountability
Right.
partner, your team member, and listening, right? The power of then just, as you said, no judgment. I'm here to listen and help each other. I think that's really powerful. What's your final words? I'd love
Oh,
any final
Ron,
words from you to my listeners.
again, I might have said them, but it's so profound. And that is, you don't need to become the person you want to be all at once, right? You don't have to change everything. People sometimes think they need to change your whole life. Your life's not working, change your whole life. No, don't do that. Sit down and figure out who you want to be. Use the heroes exercise in the book, right? So that you can have someone to model if you can't think of
Yes.
the questions, and do something every day. If you do that every day, your life will follow.
I love it. I love it. It's small daily actions that make a big difference. So thank
That's
you
right.
so much. Thank you for the book, and thank you for all the amazing advice you've given my listeners.
Well, thank you, Ron. I really appreciate it.